Kamila Sip, thank you for joining me on What's Possible in the Moment.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Well, I am thrilled to get to chat with you about this topic because we have not had anybody, to the best of my memory, talk about indecision. And you know what? It's something that is so common for leaders, even leaders at very senior levels. It's something that's common in our lives in general as well. And so, but we don't really discuss it. And so, what I love about what you're talking about is today, or I hope you're talking about today, is not just indecision, how do we make decisions and all of that, but it's also about being indecisive is a tax on you. It's a hidden performance tax is what you say. And so it's something we do want to pay attention to.
And in many ways, I think indecision and indecisiveness can be different. But when I think about recently seeing how many decisions are being stalled at the top level, what I learned is that, when I try to go back and figure out, especially with clients, what is the cause when leaders come to me and say that the team, there are breakdown in decisions, or there's communication breakdowns, or there is executive failure. So in terms of execution and performance, I usually trace it back to not that there is an issue on the team, but rather that there was a decision that was not made or it was stalled. And essentially that was a cost transfer to the decision from the decision maker to everybody that is actually doing the daily work. Because we tend to think that if we don't make a decision, if I stall the decision, that I contain it and nothing happens and I will carry on with my life or my performance and projects, etc. But unfortunately, that is not the case, because the open loops that we have in our brain is keep on running. So working memories keep running, and we are unconsciously and subconsciously are still processing the decision that wasn't made. So the cost is quite cognitive to us and emotional, and it then shows up in the quality of the project, in the quality of information, in the quality of decision making down the road. When leaders tend to think that the cost is not that much, they just are being prudent and they are being cautious and they are trying not to rush decision making, not to make any rush decisions, and it ends up being actually quite costly down the road for people who need to do the work, who need to carry on with the next steps of the projects, with this uncertainty swirling in their head about what is that we are doing, how many times are we going to be discussing this, when is the decision going to be made? Are we making it on Thursday, or we are making it in 2 months from now? There is quite a lot that is going on in between that, within that space, basically.
Yeah. Well, and what I hear you saying is it impacts not only the leader who is not making the decision, because it's taking up a lot of real estate in their own brain of this living in this constant uncertainty and thinking that they're just kind of shutting the door on it and not dealing with it. And let me just have my eyes over here and not looking, but it's still taking up valuable real estate in the brain. And it's impacting the teams, because the team, all those people who need to move forward, are living with ambiguity and uncertainty because there hasn't been a decision made.
Yes, and in some ways it's really important to also understand that the cost of that indecision is not linear. It doesn't happen 1 to 1 to 1. It's actually quite fragmented, because if the decision wasn't made at a meeting, then that impacts multiple teams. Usually, there are multiple people on that call that have multiple direct reports, which means that the one indecision is impacting 5 teams, and within the 5 teams, you have 3 to 5 people on the team. So whenever you come back as a leader to make that decision that wasn't made at the beginning, you actually end up reconstructing a lot of different assumptions that people have that were not contained, they were not coordinated, and they were quite fragmented, which obviously then it shows up in stress, anxiety, performance that lacks or becomes lackluster. So there is a lot of downwards impact that is not considered. And the other thing is that we tend to think that if we don't make a decision, then we are actually being quite cautious without understanding that the lack of decision at the top, if I'm a leader, is just that level, but it never is that level. It actually always spreads out, and it balloons in terms of the impact that is accumulated over time and across the teams that that the decision is not made
Yeah.
accurately right at the get-go. Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to highlight what you said is when we think that we're not making by not making a decision, we're being prudent and cautious. In fact, it might be having an opposite effect or maybe a different effect, maybe not necessarily opposite. It's really interesting that you bring that up because what we're finding, we're working on this VP transition program for a client that I was just telling you about, and it's for people transitioning into a VP role within the organization, as well as people coming into the organization new and going into a VP role. And one of the key expectations at that very senior level is you need to be able to make quick decisions with conviction. If we think about it, oftentimes we're going into a role and we're thinking, well, I don't want to make a decision yet. I'm newer in this role, or I'm new to the organization. I'm going to, gather all my ducks before I, go ahead and execute. And what I hear you saying, and what I know this organization wants, is yes, you want to get the data you need, but get the data you need as quickly as possible and then execute and make that decision. So I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so quite a few things popping up, because one, when we don't make a decision, we still make a decision because there is cost to that. So, and we always forget that. We tend to think there is a neutrality to us not deciding right now because we lack data. We try to decide, what to do. We think we have time. We don't want to take accountability. So there is always cost. No decision is still a decision, and we need to kind of absorb that quite consciously. I would think that when we try to assess what is the problem, or like what is the actual block that is holding the decision maker from making decision, you already allude to that in terms of like, do I need to have data? There usually are three blocks that are kind of showing up. One is the data anxiety, and that will show up with the person saying, I need more data. I'm waiting for the data to help me decide what I need to do. And in decisions that are irreversible, we should wait for that data, but that's not the same as waiting for the perfect data. So there is this maximizer versus optimizer approach to decision making. Another block that is usually showing up as well is the loss aversion. So we tend to, because we are trying to prevent the unrecognized loss, the undetermined loss, or the bad outcome, we are actually taking more risk and accumulating more cost without thinking that we are doing this. And it comes from the loss aversion that we all have. We try to avoid the bad outcome. And the way to kind of manage that, especially for leader from a coaching perspective, is to essentially help the leader map out visibly what is the cost of not making that decision rather than the cost of making the wrong decision. Because when you compare these two, it's very visible and it's in front of us. And then we realize, oh, actually, the cost is much higher of not making the decision rather than making a wrong decision that we can course correct fast. There is quite of a difference, and there is a lot of emotionality that comes in that shows up as reasoning, but it's actually emotion that is driving that decision, or the loss aversion and the lack of visibility. And the third one, which is kind of politically sensitive, is meaning politically in a organizational context, is the accountability avoidance. A lot of the times we don't realize that we don't want to own this. I don't want to own this bad outcome. So we tend to think, what does that mean if the decision is made is wrong? It's going to be accompanied with a bad outcome. What is that going to do to me? So this is the me impact that is going to show up. That again, from a coaching perspective, it will be something that I will be very actively trying to probe how to shift that. So from like, do you need to be certain that the outcome is going to be perfect or positive? Or can you actually land at being accountable for the outcome, whichever way it's going to land? So the three blocks essentially are going to show up. And they usually seem on the surface, they look the same, but they are not. And depending which one is the driving force for the decision maker stalling on the decision would require different intervention and different approach to kind of troubleshoot that and help them unlock from the bind and then move forward to actually make a decision in the best way that they can.
Oh, so much good stuff. And of course, we are at time. So, what I am going to ask is, let's say hypothetically, we have somebody who is listening in and they say, "Oh, this is what's killing me. It's killing me in my present role. I am not great at executing and making that
Right.
decision." What is the one simplest thing they can do right now to unlock the power of quicker decision making?
I would suggest figure out what is your block. Ask yourself, am I asking for data? And why? Am I trying to avoid a bad outcome rather than the cost? Or am I not really willing to hold that as my own in case things go wrong? Because that will help you decide essentially how to approach and how to troubleshoot that. So understand the why. Why are you holding? Very openly, and sometimes it's it's challenging to be very honest with yourself, but that would be my first step. Like, why? What is that I'm driving? Is it emotion or is it actually logic? Because majority of the times it would be emotion.
Kamila Sip, thank you so much for hopping on What's Possible with me.
My pleasure. Thank you.